You sound like my husband last night. I started talking about one thing, and then another thing, and then another thing, and then he goes, oh, we're talking about that now? And I was like, are you not following?
As a matter of fact, we are still. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Gospel Unplugged. It's Pastor Los. Always glad to be with you, and today especially glad to be with my very favorite colleague. No, I can't say that. No favorites. This is a long-running inside joke. Another stellar colleague.
Pastor Becca Freeman. Fun to be with you. Thank you. There's a lot of background.
A lot of backstory. Okay, we are continuing in our story of the Acts of the Apostles, which a lot of that is given over to some travels of the Apostle Paul and missionary journeys that he undertakes. And this one, he's going to it's next to Rome, it is the center of civilization in the ancient world. So Paul is in Athens. And so we're reading that story from chapter 17 in the Acts of the Apostles, beginning with verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and the devout persons, and also in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. And some Epicurean and Stoic philosophers debated with him. Some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign divinities." This was because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. So they took him and brought him to the Areopagus. "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? It sounds rather strange to us, so we would like to know what it means." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners living there would spend their time in nothing but telling or hearing something new. Then Paul stood in front of the
Areopagus.
Thank you, and said, "Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, 'To an unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, he who is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. From one ancestor, he made all nations to inhabit the whole earth, and he allotted the times of their existence and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are his offspring. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. While God has overlooked the times of human ignorance, now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will have the world judged in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead." Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some scoffed, but others said, "We will hear you again about this." At that point, Paul left them. But some of them joined him and became believers, including Dionysius, the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Okay, I practiced that word, still got it wrong. So glad you were here to get it right.
I think you just say any word with confidence and nobody really cares, right?
I didn't.
I have a daughter whose name is Liv. We spell it L-I-V, but we say it Liv. So her entire life, people call her Liv.
Sure.
It's fine. We're totally forgiving. Doesn't matter how
No,
you
I know.
say it.
I wasn't.
So I'm just saying.
I wasn't confessing. I was just thanking you.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome.
All right. So I think this is one of the most fascinating little stories on a couple of levels. I think it's super interesting to think of Paul in Athens debating Stoics and Epicureans and the philosophers of the day.
Yeah.
I love that he sort of meets them where they are by quoting some philosophy and some poetry that they would be familiar with. I love that even though he's distressed and seeing all the idols, he turns that by the time he's in conversation and says, "I can tell you're very religious because you have idols to everybody here," and then locates, including one, the unknown God. that's the one I want to tell you about. I just think it's kind of this really interesting picture of Paul.
Of Paul.
And curious.
And of culture at that time.
And of culture at the time. And curious what stuck out to you, what grabbed your attention.
Well, I like how you mentioned that it's sort of a center for thoughts and philosophy and arts and culture. And that was obvious in the ways that they were arguing back and forth. And Paul is obviously just as seasoned in knowing how to speak this kind of language in this way. And as you said, he appeals to some of the sensibilities of all of them. So what struck me was some people will believe what you have to confess because they're already kind of like believing it, and some people won't. And that's kind of what is happening in this story.
It's one of the honest moments of honesty in Acts. Not everyone believes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And Paul is undeterred by the disbelief. Whoever's interested, he'll talk more with.
Yeah.
And that's just fine.
And it's like no judgment.
Yeah, and he doesn't feel like bad. He doesn't feel take it personally. He doesn't feel like it means the gospel's not true. It's just he will offer what he has. Some people will scoff. Some people will walk away. Some people will say, I'd like to hear a little more.
Yeah. I find it really helpful for us this day and age, though, too. This is what strikes me, that it's kind of referring to idolatry, obviously. And I think he says it's, we don't just worship a God that's made by human hands or whatever. And I think that we live in a world where, yes, we can worship material things and stuff, but we can worship a lot of other things too. And so I was reminded of when I was first a pastor. I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and the pastor I worked with named Paul Matchin, who was amazing, would do something called the Great American God Hunt every year for a confirmation class. And we would drop the kids off at the mall, and then we would meet up at the food court afterwards and chat about, have them find all the gods that they could find in the mall. And, this is 2007, so people maybe don't go to malls anymore. It's all online. But you could do it anywhere you go.
Yeah.
There are just idols all around us. And it opened these young kids' eyes to be like, oh, anything and everything can be an idol if and when it's pulling you away from worship of God. Now, worship of God can look different ways. But is this the one true God that we are trying to worship? And so I think that's the question that I came away with, where are we worshiping God? How are we worshiping God? What's drawing us away from worshiping God? And I was reminded of the first commandment where Luther says, we are to fear, trust, and love God above all else, right? And everything else is like a false god. And if we lose that commandment, we kind of lose the essence of our faith.
Yeah, and Luther then defines an idol as whatever you put your hope and trust in, that is your God, that is your idol. And so I think that's a really interesting exercise or question. What are today's idols that tempt you to put your trust in them? Is it your retirement? Is it your family? And they can be good things, but just they can't bear the ultimate weight that God bears for us in terms of being ultimately trustworthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really great question, and maybe can serve as our first question.
Yeah.
This isn't about asking how faithful you are, but we all, in moments of crisis or stress, or sometimes unconsciously, begin to put our trust in material, human, mortally made things. What are some of the things that have been most appealing or tempting, or that might draw you from just trusting God? That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think you have another two.
Another two. Well, maybe. Oh, yes, I do.
Another also.
Another one. I have another also. So how can we imagine that whatever we might be doing is in service to God? So I think it also talks about once we define who this God is that we're serving, can we live our life, whatever it is, it doesn't have to look one particular way, but is it in service to this, quote, unknown God that they are talking about? Isn't this that kind of what we're...
Yeah, that is revealed. Paul says, hey, I know the unknown God.
Yeah.
His name is Jesus. And I think that's a nice corresponding question, because often the things that become idols are really good things in and of themselves. And to think differently about those things, how can they be used in service of God rather than as ultimate goods themselves? And then everything changes.
Yeah.
Just a week ago, a little while ago, we were reading the story of Lydia, And Pastor Gangard made the point, Luke at times, stories of Luke will really lift up the poor and be a little more thoughtful, cautious about the wealthy. And she said, but here Lydia is a wealthy person, but she wants to make use of that gift, not as her major place of trust, but use it to offer hospitality to Paul and others. And so I think that's a great kind of follow-up.
Yeah. I think those are my questions.
All right. Those are good questions. Yeah. Why don't you think about them, and we will see you in church.